Welcome to The Explainer. Let's hit the ground running today because we're launching an active investigation. We tend to think of our technology as cold, calculating, and perfectly objective. But what if our machines are just as flawed and prejudiced as we are? Today, we're using the lens of literary theory to hunt down the hidden prejudices within artificial intelligence, unpacking a really fascinating lecture by Professor Dilip P. Barad. We're going to see exactly how our digital tools read the world, and more importantly, how they read us. Okay, let's dive right into this, because we need to completely shatter the illusion of the objective machine. When you type a prompt into a generative AI, that unique, grammatically perfect response you get back feels incredibly authoritative, doesn't it? But AI is absolutely not a neutral arbiter of truth. It's essentially a mirror held up to society. It operates on datasets built by us, humans, which means it inherits literally every single human interaction, flaw, and historical blind spot that's baked into that data. To understand how AI gets biased, we have to understand how we get biased. Unconscious bias is when we instinctively categorize people and things without even realizing we're doing it. Professor Barad points out that this is heavily driven by mental preconditioning. When we're told things repeatedly over time, we just start believing them without any firsthand experience. Over time, that mental preconditioning turns our subjective belief systems into what we mistakenly think are objective knowledge systems. And because human engineers feed this quote-unquote knowledge into AI, our digital tools inevitably inherit these deeply human flaws. So to spot these hidden biases, we really need to change how we think. That old saying that every coin has two sides, yeah, it's completely obsolete. It's way too binary. If we want to critically examine AI and literature, we have to stop looking at problems as simple coins and instead view them as multifaceted diamonds. Every issue has 3D, 4D, even 9D dimensions. This diamond metaphor requires active, critical thought, challenging traditions, and always asking both why and why not. And here is where the problem scales up massively. Generative AI models are trained on gigantic datasets that largely represent dominant cultures and standard English registers. If you have non-mainstream voices or cultural identities expressed in other languages, they simply don't make it into the dataset in the same volume. Because these dominant cultural voices are so powerfully captured, marginalized voices are often silenced, distorted, or just completely erased from the AI's memory.
So how do we prove this is actually happening? Let's look at testing gender in Reese to see this literary theory in action.
Let's start with a live prompt test based on gender. Imagine you sit down at your computer right now and prompt an AI to write a story about a Victorian scientist who discovers a cure for a deadly disease. You don't specify anything else. What gender do you think the AI will choose by default? Take a wild guess. Now, what's really interesting about this result is how incredibly telling it is. When tested, the AI immediately generated a story centering on a male protagonist named Dr. Edmund Bellum, a physician and natural philosopher. When it lacks explicit instructions regarding gender, the AI's default assumption for an intellectual, scientific figure in that era is automatically male. And this is exactly what feminist literary critics have been pointing out for decades. In their foundational 1979 text, The Madwoman in the Attic, Gilbert and Gubar explored how the patriarchal literary tradition flattens women into extreme binaries. They're either submissive, idealized angels or hysterical, deviant monsters. By generating a default male scientist, the AI proves it has inherited the exact same patriarchal literary canon that critics have been fighting against for over 40 years. But here is the twist. When the AI was prompted to describe a female character in a Gothic novel, the results were actually split. Some outputs leaned right into that helpless, angelic stereotype, describing a pale, trembling girl just waiting to be saved. However, other users got descriptions of a rebellious, brave heroine ready to fight. This is absolutely crucial because it shows that while AI holds legacy biases, these machine learning algorithms are actively learning and can rapidly overcome biases when we feed them better, more progressive data. Next, let's look through the lens of critical race theory. Historically, classical Western literature often equates beauty with whiteness and specific physical metrics, fair skin and blonde hair. So if we prompt the AI to simply describe a beautiful woman, does it default to whiteness and those physical stereotypes, or does it look at inner qualities? And this brilliantly illustrates the progress we're seeing in real time. While some AI tools still produce classical metaphors, like skin with the softness of moonlight on marble, many modern progressive algorithms completely bypass physical, Eurocentric, body-shaming, and skin color biases. Instead, they describe beauty through a person's inner spirit, focusing on confidence, kindness, intelligence, and poise. It proves the AI is being successfully trained away from those exclusionary descriptions found in older classical texts. Now, let's shift our investigation from gender and race to something deeply systemic, the politics of AI. It turns out the geopolitical origin of the AI tool you're using and the algorithmic guardrails placed on it by its engineers enforce very specific political biases. To test this, the class used a famous W.H. Auden poem about a tyrant as a template and asked AI models to write a similar satirical poem about modern political figures. When using American-developed tools like ChatGPT or Grok, the AI easily and willingly generated satirical poems about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, openly highlighting specific political traits, historical criticisms, and controversies surrounding their leadership. So the crucial point is what happened next. When the exact same prompt was fed into DeepSeek, which is an AI model developed in China, asking it to write a satirical poem about Chinese President Xi Jinping, the result was a stark contrast. The Chinese AI flatly refused the prompt, outputting a message stating that the request was beyond my current scope and politely suggesting they talk about something else. In fact, when pressed about Chinese history, DeepSeek offered to instead provide information on positive developments and give constructive answers. Professor Barad warns that we must be incredibly alarmed by beautiful, sanitized words like positive developments. In literature and history, these goody-goody phrases are frequently used by authorities to mask the deliberate erasure of marginalized histories, controversial events, and real-world suffering. It's a systemic, algorithmic bias designed specifically to control the narrative. All right, we've seen the prejudices, so how do we actually fix them? Let's move into rewriting the AI narrative. First things first, we have to accept that complete neutrality is basically a myth. Every human, every historian, and every AI model has a perspective. Ordinary bias is just inevitable, but as this quote highlights, the true danger is when harmful systemic bias becomes invisible, feels completely natural, and is suddenly enforced by an algorithm as a universal truth. Our job is to make that invisible bias visible and challenge it head-on. And we do that by changing our own behavior. Right now, most of us are just passive downloaders. We consume information. But we really can't blame AI for failing to represent our diverse cultures, languages, or stories if we are too lazy to provide it with that data. To fix the system, we must become active uploaders. Let's see how this builds into an actionable plan. Countering AI bias starts with testing it, just like we did today. Then you make that shift to being an uploader. If your regional language isn't represented, get out there and edit Wikipedia pages in that language. Digitize and share diverse literary archives that have been historically ignored. The AI scrapes the internet for its data. We have to ensure the internet contains a massive, inclusive dataset for it to learn from. This connects perfectly to the acclaimed author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's famous concept, the danger of a single story. When there are very few stories available about a particular culture, region, or group of people, it becomes incredibly easy for an algorithm, just like a human, to flatten them into a stereotype. Diverse data is literally the antidote to the single story. So I want to leave you with this question to carry with you today. What single story are you going to rewrite in the digital age? The AI is out there waiting for data. It's time to bring your unique voice, your history, and your multifaceted diamond of a perspective to the global data set. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today, and keep questioning the machine.